You're listening to the 2019 Nelson Arts Festival, Page and Blackmore Pukapuka Talks. This session features Colquhoun, Renee Liang and Shaun Holt in conversation with Emma Espiner. Kia ora koutou. Welcome to Doctors Who Write. My name is Kerry Sunderland and I'm the coordinator of the Page and Blackmore Pukapuka Talks program, and I'm delighted to see such a huge audience. Well done for coming along. I think it's going to be a fantastic session this afternoon. And I just wanted to give a special acknowledgement to Renee Liang, for whom had the idea for this session, remember? So Renee was here last year for the festival, and as she was leaving, she said, I've got this idea about a good session for you for next year. So big ups to Renee for planting that seed in my mind, and here it is today. So I'd like to say a special thank you again to Page and Blackmore. Of course, it's National Bookstore Day today, so go and say happy birthday to them. And of course, there will be copies of all of the authors' books at the bookstop afterwards, and you can come up, and hopefully everyone's available for signing. Yeah, great. So just a few housekeeping things. Please turn off your phones. Check them, that they're off. Yay, I see that movement. And also we're recording this, so it'll be available as a podcast later. So will there be a little time for questions at the end? See how we go? Yeah. But if you do ask a question, I'll pass you the mic, and if you could speak into it really closely, as close as you can without licking it, that would be great. Okay. And then now it's my pleasure to introduce Emma Espiner, who is going to be chairing this session. And over to you. Welcome everybody. Thank you.
Kia ora Kerry, and tēnā koutou e hoa mā. Anō mai hara mai ki te whare nei mō tēnei kaupapa. Ko Waio, ko Tararua te maunga, ko Ohau te awa, ko Tainui te waka, ko Ngāti Tūkore te iwi. Kia ora everyone, and welcome to this session, Doctors Who Write. My name's Emma and I'm the chair for this panel. For those of you that weren't able to join us for the Living Longer brunch earlier, I'm a semi-local, so my mum Colleen, who's up the back there, is from Golden Bay, and we spent all of our childhood holidays there, and I now have a 5-year-old daughter that I take back every year, so it's a very special part of the world for me. It's quite an ask to get a medical student to chair a panel of doctors. Doctors aren't great at taking instruction at the best of times, and particularly not from medical students, so we'll see how they go with my first request, which is to introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll launch into things. So Shaun, would you like to start us off?
Thank you. Yeah, Shaun Holt, a pharmacist and a doctor trained in the UK, arrived here 21 years ago today, so it's an anniversary. And have specialised in natural products, both being critical of some of the silly and dangerous ones, but also encouraging the use of other ones. Along the way, I've written 11 books, and the latest one is a little-known plant not many people have come across called Cannabis sativa, but I'll maybe talk about it a bit later.
Kia ora.
Hi, I'm Renee. I'm a paediatrician currently working in Whangarei Hospital, but I've worked in a lot of hospitals all around New Zealand and Australia, including Blenheim and Nelson. And I also write plays, poetry, opera, various a non-fiction book, various other things. And this is, I guess, I wanted to. I'm not local, but I do have a little kind of this area story. Like, as you know, it's a Rugby World Cup at the moment, and I was watching the final, doing a locum at Blenheim Hospital. In 2011, and I invited my husband along, and afterwards we celebrated in the usual way. And 9 months later, my daughter was... I won't tell you exactly which hotel it was, but so now that's pretty public. Sorry, podcast. Yep.
Beat that.
I'm blushing now, Renee. I'm not going to knock on your door tomorrow. My name's Colquhoun, and I live in a little place called Waikawa Beach, which you could paddle to from here, probably the quickest way to get to, just across the strait. And I work as a GP in a youth health service in Horowhenua. Work with young people from the age of 10 to 24, so adolescent medicine. And worked around the North Island as a junior doctor, up north, of course, a lot. and ties to Nelson, 2 ties. I always come to Nelson, I think of my dear friend Richard Nuns. I used to come and visit here a lot and get growled by. Just really wanted to meet him because, he was a distinctive character and I guess walked those paths between Te Ao Pākehā and Te Ao Māori and was a real role model for me in that. So just remembering Richard. The second thing is I'm a keen student of history, so I always think about the Waido affair and Te Rangi Haiata killing Arthur Wakefield when I come to Nelson, because Wakefield was from here, of course, and Te Rangi Haiata, one of your cousins, Emma, is buried just up the road from us. So I stand on the beach at Waikawa. I think of Te Rangi Haiata behind me and looking out towards the Sounds in Nelson with Wakefield down here, and it feels like the history of my country shatters into a geography before and behind me. So, but I've got no stories of having children to celebrate World Cup victories. Yet, of course, yet. Who knows? It's not too. It's too late.
Okay.
You've got a week.
It's far too. I'd need more than a week, I can tell you that.
Let's wrap up that line of discussion there. Starting with you, Shaun, I had a look at your Twitter feed and you said on it that this was the first Writers' Festival that you've come to speak at. So tell us why you write.
Yeah, look, I do dozens of talks, so this is very different for me. I've had to, being an artist now, I've grown a beard. So I hope you appreciate that. Why do I write? In the field I operate in, which is natural health and complementary therapies, there is so much bad information. And really the books are to try and give out good information. It's very, very simple. Because as we talked before, doctors are not trained in this at all, really. So I'm pretty unique in specialising in this field. And yet patients are really interested in this. A lot of consultations are about natural health and complementary therapies, particularly people with cancer, for example. Most people with cancer use them. A quarter of people who use complementary therapies will use at least 7 for people with cancer. So I'm not surprised they're looking at every option possible. But there's so much bad information out there. That could be in the print media. So, for example, I literally saw one day in the Herald, on page 2, it said coffee causes diabetes, and on page 7 it said coffee cures diabetes. And also the internet, of course, the wild west of information, and a lot of what we call pseudoscience. On the surface, it looks sensible, but if you think about it for a bit, or you know what you're talking about, it's not. If I had my slides with me, I usually flash up a slide, and it says, beware that all the information you see on the internet is not correct. A quote attributed to Abraham Lincoln. And this is a quick audience. This is a sharp audience, but a lot of it just goes way over their heads. And interesting. So there's a lot of bad information out there. So mine covered different natural health topics and I try and put good scientific info out there.
And I'll come to Renee shortly, but I just wanted to tease out something you said in our earlier discussion, which was, your thoughts around medical cannabis and that patients are the experts and that we're going about it the wrong way, trying to medicalise it.
Yeah, that's right. And look, everyone's got a view on cannabis. I think the whole election next year is just going to be dominated by cannabis discussions. It's going to be legalised for medical use. The rules are coming out in December, and we have a referendum for social use, of course, next year. But the model that's being looked at almost certainly is that doctors are going to prescribe it, and I just think that's absolutely prone to failure. And that's one of the learnings. I don't want to talk about my book the whole time, but one of the learnings was, for the first time, I interview people, which I've never done before. And being a hard-headed scientist, I was very sceptical of stories as a source of scientific information. But I just learned so much from interviewing people in the book. And one of the main learnings was, for cannabis, they are experts. My word, they all had folders full, and they knew exactly what they're doing, and they're always tweaking it, and they'll have this in the morning and this in the afternoon, and keep changing things. And that's not compatible with going to a doctor who says, take 3 of these every day. So I just think that it's going to fail if we try to do this. So that's my personal view. Time will tell.
Renee, I didn't want to write an introduction for you because you're nauseatingly multi-talented, and
this doesn't have anything to do with the fact that I supervised you.
Well, I dodged that. Let's be honest. And the thing I notice about Renee is that she seems to have a story that she wants to tell, and then she just picks the medium that will suit, and it doesn't matter if she hasn't written an opera before or a computer game. It just kind of go ahead and do it. Is that right? Is that about right about your process?
So yeah, I mean, I see all the mediums, and that actually includes all the arts, visual arts as well, and dance and so on. They're like toolboxes. They're like like you might have a palette knife, a brush, watercolor, pencil, something. They're all just different ways, but. And this is not my insight, this is something I heard, but I agree. There is a particular form that will suit the story that you want to tell. So you pick the form for the story that you want to tell. Operas obviously are very suited to very dramatic stories that grab at the emotions. A poem is so compact and so beautiful and tight and can grab someone and make them cry in 3 minutes. That's the kind of story, that's what you want to tell, but it won't usually last for a longer narrative unless you write a series of poems. So there's lots of different forms, and I guess I'm only in my mid-40s, so I've got enough time to try all of them. Ticked off most of them by now. But
yes, I'm sure there's some that you can go at.
Yeah.
What about you, Glenn? Why do you write?
There's lots of different reasons for writing, and I guess, and they've changed over time. Instinctively, I'd say now, after 25 years of writing, it's just deeply ingrained habit. It's a way of seeing now, a way of looking at the world. And I've come to see that writing's not just about writing, it's not just about the time you spend with the pen on the paper. It's an attitude to the world, it's a curiosity, it's an ability to mind the moment, to stop a moment and just open up the ranch slider of the moment and go inside it and find out and see all the shattering prisms of it, I think. And so I think poetry in particular is the literature of the moment, and so I find that's a way of life, and I find writing also turns a deep cog in me. It turns this deep cog, the practice of writing, and that cog turns another cog that brings things up to the surface. So if I stop writing, I stop thinking in a particular way, and that's what I really write for now, to keep the cog turning. Yes, to produce work, all these other reasons, but that if I don't turn that cog, if I don't do my practice, that stuff stops coming up. I stop seeing in this particular way that I like to see. So it becomes an existential thing. It becomes a martial art. Yeah. I keep thinking of that Panda, the movie that my daughter watched.
I'm great at martial arts.
He talks like that all the time, by the way. This is not for this setting. This is
That's why I ended up in adolescent medicine.
So, and is writing compatible with medicine? Is the arts compatible?
I get asked this question all the time. How do you manage to do everything? Because I guess I'm very actively practicing medicine and I'm very actively writing. But actually I see what I'm doing as, and I'm sure you guys will agree, it's all actually the same thing. It's stories. So, I mean, obviously you weight it differently if you're treating a subject matter as a writer compared to as a doctor. But when someone comes into my room, the first thing I say is, tell me your story. Maybe not like that, but I say, what's happening for you? What are you worried about? And we tease it out, and actually I spend most of my time in that consultation listening to the story, maybe drawing out threads of it. The examination and the investigations is very, very little. For all of us, GP, specialists, none of us, and as a medical student you will have been told as well that, it's all in the history. It's all in the story. So, and then I guess what I see is that also the cure is in the story. So there are all these therapies that we can use, complementary therapies, but a large part of your complementary therapies that you're investigating will have been narrative-based therapies, or arts-based therapies which are narrative-based. So, but actually what I do, I find that even if someone comes into my room and they're very, stressed out, they're worried about their car park running out, they've had to, grab 3 children, all of whom are screaming, they talk to me for half an hour, they calm down, and afterwards, if I've done a good job, they will be out of there at least thinking that somebody will have listened to them. And it is an advantage for me being a specialist because I do have half an hour. It's not like a GP. But the listening and then the reframing of the story and then I'll help you to change your story in some way, will change your story, will help you in some way. That's important.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm just never surprised that doctors write, and because it's a storytelling profession at its heart. And I think actually it's a false view of medicine, because of course as a doctor you do get asked that question: how do you balance it? But it's not like that being a doctor. People think being a doctor is a lot about science and medicine and technology and stuff, but it's not. There's much about being a doctor that's a secular priesthood. People come and confess. They come and tell you stuff because there's a social role for a doctor, so people come in. So they come, and it's a place where it's socially accepted that intimacy can be created very quickly. And if you buy into that, if you allow it, if you create space in the consultation for that, then people talk, and people have layers of fear. And if they think, I can trust you with that, I'll trust you with the second fear and the third fear. And you get, and I think, so there's much, the technology is at the end of it, especially in primary care, is minuscule, and the storytelling's massive. So I think it doesn't surprise me that doctors write, and it doesn't surprise me that writing makes you a sharper doctor.
Yeah, what you were saying about the kung fu of medicine, that idea that I have a metaphor, like when I teach students how to do drips, like. You have to, especially in children, it's very difficult. Sometimes you don't know where the vein is, but for some reason, if you've done it enough, you have an instinct for where you are and where you might be underneath the surface of the skin. And for a writer, it's like that too. You feel where you are underneath the surface, and you can pick up all the layers underneath the surface almost by instinct, but actually it's not instinct, it's experience and training, isn't it? And I agree with you, Glenn, it's that the art of medicine is something that potentially wasn't covered when I was a medical student. I think it's much better covered now for you, having met your classmates. I think you guys are a lot more switched on, and the idea of understanding stories and layers of stories and all the subtleties is introduced far earlier in the curriculum, and I think that's fabulous.
Is that something I was going to pick up on? Because in our earlier discussion, I don't think people have doctors like you necessarily as a rule. And what's that about? Is that a generational thing? Is that the old way of doing medicine, that paternalism, the thing that, drove you from the NHS as a refugee,
Yeah, the 100-hour shifts, that was pretty rough. But yeah, look, I'm not criticising my fellow doctors or anything, but I think a lot of it is the system. If you've got a surgery full of people and you've got 5 minutes to see them as a GP, you can't get into detailed stories. So for some of the natural therapists out there, for example, they will have 90-minute consultations. And, I'd be very sceptical of some of the products. It's pretty harmless. That they recommend. But so why do people keep going back to them? It's because they want to be heard for 90 minutes. That's incredibly therapeutic. And I mean, it's, and this all sort of, I think, comes down to the power of the mind over the body, which we're still learning a lot about. We touch on it in medicine with the placebo effect, which is far stronger, I think, than people even realise. For example, when I was a junior researcher, we did asthma research. We'd ask people, we'd give them they'd blow in a machine and we'd get a reading for their lungs. Then we'd give them an inhaler with nothing in there, and we'd tell them it's a great drug, So it was a placebo, there was no drug in there. A minute later, they would blow 30% bigger. So that's a direct, obvious example of the power of the mind. So, and also related to what you were saying, also I think art can be therapy as well. And, this is one of the biggest things I've come to accept is, for example, art therapy, which can be doing art, or it could be music or drama, all these things. And some hard-headed doctors, including me 10 years ago, would have said, what the hell are you talking about? That is, no way is that a therapy. But there's been studies done, and who knows what the mechanism of action is. Doctors get a bit obsessed by that sometimes.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter.
I don't care. If it's safe and it works, I really, really don't care. Maybe it's just the social side, or people with cancer who are going out and doing something for a day rather than worrying about their illness. I don't know and I don't care. So,
I think I think that after 20 plus years of practicing, and just 2 or 3 quick things, I think I'm more than anything now, the thing that guides me and the thing that I've seen is that people are medicine to people. Yeah, and I don't think we value that enough in medicine, and we keep measuring a people effect, and not always a technology effect. And so I think sometimes the doctor's job is to be the person, is to be a person and to draw on other things in their personhood and in their experience, and to bring that and that sense of shining upon somebody, especially a young person, to put yourself in a place where you can shine upon them. And I don't mean in a wanky sort of way, but in a way where you look at them with care, with affection, with humour. That physical, we know in our deep structure what it means for someone to shine on us. We have people in our lives who shine on us. And sometimes it's the job of the doctor to do that. And I reckon there's a whole science in it. There's transfer of something that we don't know and haven't measured. Because I see it so often that people are medicine to people. And I don't think it's new. I think it's old as the hills. And I think if you talk, and when I talk to old doctors, they use it in bags. And they're not so bound like all older people. They're all just a bit like, all the stuff, no matter what profession, 99% of it's bullshit. Just be open. Yeah. Open the doors, whether you're teaching, whether you're a policeman. There's so much achieved by not getting too clever. And I think old doctors know this, and I think they are braver at standing back. I think you've got mid-career doctors. There's a massive crunch in the system to stop you doing the medicine we were taught the same medicine, but when you get in the system says, actually, carry on. Yeah.
Well, I think there's a place for all types of personalities in doctors as well. Like there's, you do want somebody who's going to get on and do the stuff. If you're, an emergency department doctor or an ICU doctor, you just need, you need somebody who's going to look at the numbers, make a decision, not, obviously also look at the story, but at that point, fast, numbers-orientated, technology-orientated action is necessary. And then there's the slow medicine. But I also wanted to pick up on that shining a light. I think in some ways it's also like lighting a torch in your patient and the people around them, because actually, as you say, people are medicine to people. All of us. It's not my special training that enables me to heal. It should be me trying to say to everybody, well, actually, all of us have an ability to heal each other. And going back to what Shaun was saying, all these art therapy. That's also not a specialist thing. This is the Arts Festival. You guys have had, a week of amazing arts-oriented events. Also, Nelson is extremely rich in huge community arts events and creative events and community building events pretty much year round. And you can see that this lifts the health of the population. It stops people from getting trapped into their isolation, anxiety, depression. It's money well invested. And I say that having read some of the literature that has gone into investing money into social community building, arts-orientated events. So I just want to say big up to the Nelson City Council and all the donors who have sponsored the Nelson Arts Festival. So, because they're doing the right thing.
You all look pretty crook to me. You need to buy more poetry, all of you.
Buy my book.
Buy more poetry.
Yeah. But related to this, I think I actually published. I did a survey once of patients, and I think I published it. I can't remember. And basically, a really simple question: would you rather have a really clever doctor or a really nice doctor? What do you think it was? Overwhelmingly, they wanted the nice one, which I thought was fascinating. Even going back to my old favourite, the placebo effect, there's been studies where they've had, actors, and a doctor will appear to be really confident and open and empathetic and all these things, and give a placebo, and the response was far better than if the doctor was an actor pretending to be incompetent and didn't care at all. So there's actually a bit of science behind that. And just final thing, just something Glenn touched upon, again, not being critical as a fellow doctor or anything, is more a reflection of the system. But I went to see a doctor recently, and of course doctors are the worst people to go and see doctors. It's probably the first time in 20 years. And she was a new graduate, and we didn't have much time at all, and she didn't look at me once. She was just looking at the computer.
Oh, yeah.
And I just thought, oh my God, that's different to when I used to see things. I'm not blaming her. She had 50 people to get through, but, I didn't feel good about it.
And I think it's so incredibly important. I look at my colleagues, and I've been there, and I think doctors as individuals have to come to terms with emancipating themselves from that. I really do. They have to learn. Medicine is actually a profession full of rebellion. It's a history of rebellion. And the system as it is ripe for rebellion. And doctors, young doctors, need to find how they're going to rebel, because they will be squashed, and it's like brutal for a young doctor in that system. I think every colleague has to find their way out of the machine, because they're on the rack, some of them. And some of them don't know it, some of them do, and everybody steps off in different ways. We've probably found our refuge in different ways, but I'm very conscious of hiding in a small cave. And it's like I can operate within this cave, but don't drag me out
all
of that.
three of us have actually stepped out of the system in some way. And it's, I guess, that was good for me. Presumably it was good for you. So I agree. And I totally agree as well that doctors are rebels. Just yesterday, I believe the editor of The Lancet, one of the most important medical magazines in the world, tweeted that all doctors should take part in civil disobedience to combat climate change, like actively break the law. That's what he actually tweeted. I mean, that's amazing. And previously a whole bunch of doctors in Australia, they rebelled against the government trying to gag them against speaking out about Manus Island and the refugees. The most senior guy in paediatrics, Prof. Isaacs, who edits, one of the most important paediatric journals, he basically said, okay, I'm going to go to the media right now. You guys can arrest me if you want, because I'm doing it real public, and I'm the most senior paediatric professor in Australasia. So go ahead, do it. And it was great. I thought it was. There is a. In some ways, it is good to, I guess, lead as well with our stories and with our spirit.
You're on the cusp of coming out of the cave, though. You're in that zone.
Yeah.
I love the cave, though. The cave's, I do, and that's, for me, because, human beings are trajectories too, and I love the consultation. So as long as I'm in my cave and I've got a consultation, that's, consultation's like a poem. It's this developing, it's this tiny little hadron collider. And I'm happy there for the rest of my days. But you do see things that, if everybody's drinking from the same tap and they've all got vomiting and diarrhea, you're like, well, we need to do something about the tap. So there's times when I feel quite guilty, not saying we're not dealing as a country with the trauma that we inflict, big people inflict on little people. And, there's an underbelly in New Zealand, or there's two New Zealands. There's a New Zealand that looks okay on the surface, but there's a New Zealand underneath that's traumatising little people. And we're not having ongoing useful conversations. We're having growling conversations about it. We're having thou shalt not conversations, which just stigmatise and mess it all up worse. and we're saying we're not like these people are different. We're not having a mature conversation about our society and what's good about it and what sits in the machine that can catch little people and mangle them, and what can stamp back onto a new generation hurt over and over and over again. And this is a massive, adverse life events in young people are a massive driver of ill health in New Zealand. So I think we should have that conversation and just a conversation about how we should run a health system in a sensible way instead of a partisan knee-jerk reactionary way, but in a way that reflects thinking and our values and sense and joins up the health system rather than keeps chopping it into tiny little bits, so that it fractures all the time. But then I just want to stay in the cave. Yeah. The cave's fun, Yeah.
And you'd see that, Renee, with like literal little people in paediatrics. I mean, that's the sort of canary in the mine stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I've just, I've just finished a big essay looking at the effect of family poverty, because actually, as you know, there are a couple of paediatricians in the room, and I think we would all agree that, a lot of what we're seeing is you can pretty much pin poverty as one of the root causes, and it is about all inequality. I mean, we're returning to the same themes that we covered this morning as well. Again and again, there are two New Zealands. There's a big gap. It's been building for some time, and it's generally a result of policies, but also, I guess, misunderstandings. And in some ways, a lot of my work could be cut down if I didn't stay in my cave of a clinic room, if I didn't stick to my place as just a doctor warming my seat, part of the machine, if I actually went out and started talking to politicians or writing stories for the media like you are, Emma, and various other things, or writing, plays about it or whatever, then, I'm actually doing a bigger thing by getting the story out there and not being an official doctor. And I guess in some ways that's one of the paths I'm taking at the moment. I'm sort of moving into sort of essays, and I wrote a play about bullying in the medical profession recently, and that's a big issue in my profession and is contributing to the workforce issues that we have and various other things.
Sounds like a great profession to have chosen.
Yeah. Sorry.
This conversation would have been great 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But I see, and all that's, there's lots of work to do in medicine, but it's like I also say to you, it's the most beautiful, stunning profession. The view is stunning, and the intimacies, the kindnesses, the silences between people, the patting of hands, is stunning. Like it's all that it is to be human, to be there. And it's been the deepest privilege of my life, which means that you care about it when it's a bit messed up, so I wouldn't be discouraged for young people who want to be doctors. I think she's a mighty ride, and it's beautiful, and it's full of art, and it's full of the most, let's not talk down science. Science has got all the best stories, and science is really just another kind of story. And poetry and medicine are both the sons of dreaming, and you can find dreaming aplenty in medicine. This is the work of men and women, to find your place, to say it's a broad church, where should I stand? And you learn your skills. You can't race the skills. That's the deepest frustration as a student I had, is I just was terrified I would kill somebody. Now I know I will kill somebody. But I was terrified and you're terrified to acquire the skill for a while, and then there's no way around that but through it. And then you start to find out, what will my shape in medicine be? And that's determined by all sorts of things. But
yeah, I mean, that thing about not knowing, and I've just pulled this up. This poem, I guess, illustrates your point. I'll just read
it's
my
not the
poem.
boob. Is it the boob
It's
poem?
not the boob poem. No, that's later,
That's
guys.
later.
Yeah. So this is I went to a girls' school and had to learn 13th chapter of the First Corinthians off by heart, which I used to be able to recite in 2 minutes once, very fast. But this is a poem that I wrote that probably you guys will recognise a little bit. It's called 13th. Though I speak with tongue tied to heart, to brain, to tell you maybe there is hope, the clanging cymbals tell me otherwise. And though you watch me as if I were a prophet, as if angels held my shaking hands as I intubate your small one, I want to say, I don't know. And though I believe in all mysteries of science, have faith in the internet, move mountains of textbooks, sometimes, in the end, this means nothing. Life suffers long. It is full of small, kind acts, of words lushly beautiful or barren in their honesty. Sometimes, when all algorithms fail, when there's nothing to say, when even experts can tell you no more, sometimes we can only wait. We can only hold hands, for we know only in part. I say, look, he's perfect. And he is, even under the tubing and beeping and hourly drawback of dark blood and masks and the gentle huff-huff of the ventilator. We look at him through plastic windows in that darkened room, face to face. We breathe with him. In those moments, parents become children. For we know only in part. But know this, of literature, science, love, these three, the greatest of these is love.
Thank you. Thank you. It's beautiful. Are you in the mood for reading something as well?
Yeah, and look, it's it's spooky, eh? Because there's only one poem I wanted to read to you, and it's a collection of poems I've been writing to the young people at the clinic, which I've been working on for the last 3 or 4 years, and hopefully you will see the light of day next year. But so they're letter-type poems, and in that there's a series of letters to a young nurse that I've written, and so I'll read you the last of those. It's the last poem in the book, and I think if I have anything intelligent to say after 20 years of medicine, it would be distilled into this. And so I might change it to Letter to a Young Doctor, yeah, for Emma. This last thing I have to say to you. At the end of the day, the most powerful medicine I know of is love. It has taken me some time to see that, and perhaps longer to say. But love has been a word misplaced by us all, maligned by the measurers without ever knowing it was there in their rulers and tape. I have called it wonder. My hands deep in the belly, pulling it apart, then bringing it back together. But really, this is love. I have called it anger, my fist in the air at the brute, dumb will of men. But what love this hints at. I have called it hate, knowing that whatever I choose next might break me as well, but even this grows out of love. You might find the word perhaps in some forgotten storeroom, where it languishes still, piled behind discarded books and bedpans, drip stands and paper towels. It will sit on some old and dusty shelf, still unexpired, pick it up and turn it over. It will say in an ancient and no longer understood language, here is the oldest spell of all. Love for those who are broken. Love for those who hold out their hands. Love for those up in the middle of the night. Love for the sick. Love for the blind. Love for the deaf. Love for the ill. Love for the dying. Love for those who steal. Love for those who cling on. Love for those who have lost their way. Love for those who love. Tie this word around your neck and do not let them tell you it has had its day. So often, I'm just starting. There's 14 pages of it. So often I have flown over the ill, as though they were a wide and foreign sea, and I a small bird travelling from one side of the world to the other. For years I have made the migration, hung in the clouds, searched for updraft and current. At times I have soared, clipping the tops of the waves, looking down into the faces staring back up at me, and wondered what rest there might be there. So often when I have been weary, I have dragged myself onwards, thought of home, looked into the distance, landed again in my own country at last, broken and spent. Once, overcome, mesmerised too by the faces I saw, tired beyond comprehension and sick of the sky and its talk, I let my feet trail the skin of all I had attempted to cross and settled myself against it. There I sank, expecting to be pulled down at once. Instead I sat on the sea and bobbed, held up by all I had pushed down. For a time it seemed I floated, caught in the palm of some other hand, kept at last from my fear and all the terrors of safety itself. In that moment, I realised I had drowned. And then it was I understood that this thing surrounding me had kept me alive. This thing pushing up below me. This thing closing over the top of me. This thing caught in my nostrils and mouth and throat and choking me. All of it was love. And so when I breathed love. And when I smiled love. When I ate, it was love. I ate. There was pain, but inside the pain was love. There was sorrow, but inside the sorrow was love. There was sickness, but inside the sickness was love. For a moment I did not need to do anything else but be there. That was all the medicine there was to it. I became well unwell. I became you and me. I became lost and found. I became everything and nothing. It was a dream, but not a dream at the same time. Later, somehow, I found myself in the sky again. I made my way back home once more, went back to a kind of living. But ever since I have known that somewhere there is a secret tunnel from this life to another. I am not sure how this can be so, but I saw it on that day, and above all else, I wish it, my friend, for you. So it's not all bad.
Awesome. Thank you. We might open up for questions now, actually. It's a good time.
You don't want to quote from one of my books?
Right, well, I would actually, like the many, the validated uses of cannabis would be very interesting.
I'll try one, actually. I'll try one. I don't think it's going to work. Probiotics. Very good for diarrhea caused by antibiotics. No, I'm going to give up.
That was almost a haiku.
Yeah, that's
really good.
Bit more training.
Yeah. Could I lighten the mood a little bit with the
boobs?
The boobs, yeah. Cheers. I feel like we're in need of a laugh, so at my expense. For most of my adult life, boobs were an accessory, useful for padding tops and bouncing gently, hopefully seductively, as I moved about my business. I liked them. They were bee-sized and fitted the Goldilocks conditions, not too big and not too small. My middle sister was flat-chested, not that she ever cared, but I was quite smug that I did not suffer from this problem. Ditto for my poor friends with tits so huge they complained no one ever looked at their faces. So I got pregnant. The veins in my chest, this book, by the way, is about me getting pregnant and having a baby. The veins on the chest were actually the giveaway. Being the doctor I was, my mind ticked panic-stricken through a number of possible causes, including high blood pressure, tumour and clots, before I decided to buy a pregnancy test from the supermarket. That pregnancy didn't turn out, but the veins and boobs have been the sentinels of every pregnancy since. With the pregnancy that became my daughter, my boobs swelled cartoonishly from the second month, with growing pains to match the speed of inflation. My flat-chested sister, who by now had become a breast surgeon, go figure, sent me an email advising me, in her no-nonsense authoritative way, because she's a surgeon, to scrub my nipples with something rough. According to her, this was the only way to prepare my boobs for the trauma of breastfeeding. I sheepishly loofed a few times, then forgot, as other pregnancy worries took precedence. I remember my first night with a newborn, all mouth and tiny limbs in different pillow positions. I'd spent hours teaching new mums to breastfeed, but with my own it was different. I fully expected karma to kick in and to have problems with milk supply, with latching, with reflux, but I was one of the lucky ones. Even the nipple cracking was minor compared to the bliss of having a small, warm mouth eagerly clamped down, tongue, chin and ear all moving in rhythm. I never knew before I had my own that children sigh in satisfaction after they have a bellyful of warm milk. And both my children purr, yes, purr, when presented with booby. I'm going to write a medical paper on that one day. My B-sized days are a distant memory as I sling my E-sized beauties into maternity bras. Sorry, it's all gone. I now have breasts worthy of the term hooters. The problem is now too much cleavage rather than too little. I even have to vet my clothing choices, not only for how much they reveal my top, but also for colour. Too light and the dreaded wet patch is obvious. Dark tops work well, but then after it dries, there are elegant little tidal marks of milk. Sorry, there's many women in the audience that are laughing, and the guys are just starting to wish they'd not stayed. Yeah. One thing people never tell you about breasts is what excellent alarm clocks they make. If I was out without my daughter at the 3-hour mark, boomph, my breasts would explode, straining outwards. If I was sleeping, I got woken up. It got so I could tell the time by my breasts. Here you go.
Just to lower the tone further, I'm very good at that. Something we'll all relate to. My first book, actually, when I was a medical student, was a collection of medical mnemonics to remember things. And of course, you probably got some of those. I won't start them, but the ruder the better, I can tell you that. And I can still remember them to the day.
You got to give us one now.
Oh, well, this isn't a real one, but if I'm going to test, you're the medical student. Oh, yeah.
No, I'm in control here.
On Old Olympus towering top, a Finn and German spanner hop, or it starts O, a virgin... Here we go. What is it? Yeah, that's the cranial nerves. Yeah.
Or the vessels, the femoral vessels, navy.
Yeah.
You know that one?
Yeah.
All right. Can someone please have a question?
Yeah, sorry, we're just going to keep going. We're going to get worse and worse.
Please make them stop.
Yeah.
They'll start testing me soon. It's in their nature. Actually, I was stunned to read that cannabis is not, in fact, a weed. You wrote that?
No, it is a weed.
No, you did. It's in your book.
No, it is a weed. It grows everywhere. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Or I'll have a word with the publishers if not.
I'm writing. Yeah. And it was, in a botanical sense. You said it. Sorry, I'm getting distracted here, but I like to be right.
There's got to be some questions.
Come on, someone.
You guys are all speechless.
You proceed.
I have one.
Shaun, have you ever thought of writing? You've been a non-fiction fact writer. Have you ever secretly delved into the dark side?
Yeah, I think I've got a medical thriller novel in me. Yeah, like Michael Crichton. He did Jurassic Park and ER and things like that. He was a doctor. I used to like his sort of stuff. So yeah, it's on the horizon. But it'd be a medical thriller, not the wonderful stuff these guys do.
What are you guys working on at the moment?
Oh, I've just written some episodes for a kids' radio series.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, so I'm doing kids' writing now. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've got three or four collections of poems that have been sitting on that I'm slowly going to bring out. Yeah, and a children's book. So yeah.
And you told us that you've got a big speech coming up.
Oh well, a big speech full of in. Yeah, there'll be 3 people there. No, a speech at Palmerston North Hospital.
An oration, no less.
Yeah. So, I guess, and I've used that to put together my thoughts about the health system. So that's been a really interesting process because I've lots of thoughts. But the good thing about writing too is like everybody has lots of thoughts, but writing forces you to join them up and say something that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So that's been really good for telling me what I think, as much as anything. So yeah. So.
I know a few journalists. I might send them along to that speech.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got a question?
Kia ora. My name's Kay. I just wondered if you wanted to think about or give us your ideas about 2 things. One about the word disease and whether it's not being at ease or a pathological something or other, because that's something I learned when I was a medical student and it really impressed on me and taught me something. And the other is, how much would you start looking at patients being the people that teach you, or how much you learn from them as well as how much you find you're in that role of being all confident and helping them, not being, like that pastoral thing that Glenn was talking about.
I agree with you. There's a huge problem with the terminology that we use in medicine. Disease, disorder, various things. And in fact, these, as a paediatrician, I'm often asked to diagnose things as disorders that probably aren't really disorders. If, even if they fit the criteria, the DSM-5, it's not necessarily a disorder if you look at what is around that patient, even a patient, right? What is around that person? Have they got the supports? Are they coping? What can you do to give them the skills to help themselves? And I agree also, I'm constantly learning from my patients. In fact, that is probably one of the major things I teach my medical students. Always remember that you are actually, all the way through your life, you have to be learning actively, whether you're learning from other doctors or you're learning from the people that you meet in the clinic room. Otherwise, I think you're not doing yourself a service.
Yeah, that's literally how we learn as medical students. And even if we see an interesting patient, we'll write it up as a case report. That's actually a form of scientific report, interesting patients, the story behind them. So, yeah, we do it all the time.
Always bothered me, the idea of taking a history, though.
Yeah, sharing a history. There's this interesting thing, particularly ever since I became a parent. In medical school, I don't know if this still happens, we were taught very much to not be personal, to keep ourselves out of the picture. Don't sit on the patient's bed. Don't share anything about your personal life. That's not professional. But actually, I'm starting to drop a lot of little, oh, me too, or, oh, yeah, no, I felt that way, oh, don't worry, no, your son is acting exactly the same as my son did at the same age. I do that deliberately because I feel that it does make quite a big difference, and, I don't know that's
something
unprofessional.
That Renee said on our panel, that she had to get through that veneer with a doctor before they were human with her.
Yeah, she said, they became people, right? She had to wait for them to become human first.
Seems absurd, actually. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just coming with the mic. I was just tiptoeing before, now I'll run. Could you pass it, please?
Sure. Kia ora. Thank you for a wonderful session. I'm interested on your feedback as to whether your ability to write has helped you in the words that you might use to communicate with patients. And I'm particularly thinking, Glenn, of a poem, I'm sorry, I don't remember the name, but that you wrote earlier with a Māori woman. And then at the end, she said, well, why didn't you say that in the beginning? So I'm just wondering whether your process of using words more often has helped you to find the words to communicate better.
Yeah, for sure. There's no question. And there's a lot, medicine is about listening to stories and utterly about learning from patients. So, everything useful I've learned from a patient and from being wrong, actually. Wrong over and over and over and over again. Not just wrong about my medicine, but wrong about my judgment about that person. That's the best learning, yeah. And also, look, I say my patients have saved me. They look after me. They care for me, and they slowly get me to see how I should be looking at it. They're very patient. But that's a real phenomena, I think. And again, it's the longer I practice medicine, the more I appreciate my patients. They're a massive textbook. And like they know about cannabis, they know shit. They're experts, of course. And you think, of course they do, but in medicine you're taught so often to look in the book. And the book's important. I don't want to, there's a role for the book. Like, if my heart stops beating, find a doctor with really poor communication skills. It's got a big needle. But there's lots of medicine that is about explaining, and explaining in lots of different ways. The gallbladder's an upside-down bottle of palm olive, and a gallstone stuck in the nozzle. So there's metaphor all the time in medicine is really helpful. So if metaphor is your stock and trade as a writer, I love the challenge of finding the right metaphor for a young person. The second thing is a lot of what I do is adolescent medicine. So young people talk to me, and they talk to me. I hear a lot of stories of sadness and stories of fears, and things that they're frightened of and things that they're sad about. And sadness and fear... I'll just read you a poem. Is that all right? It's a short poem, but I just thought it's about stories and explaining things. And I think it's probably... I always rather read a poem than answer things, because poems sort of sum things up. And... and that's if I can ever find it.
I've actually prescribed slam poetry before to patients, Because, I mean, if they come into my room and they're young people that have a problem with expressing themselves and they've identified writing as one of their strengths, I say, hey, have you tried poetry? Have you tried slam poetry? I happen to know who actually does slam in your town, and maybe I could introduce you. And yeah, that's pretty... so don't discount all the other therapies that you can use as medical therapies.
I've just looked at this poem and it's in no way an answer to your question.
Read it anyway. Yeah.
I'm just going to read it anyway. That's why people don't come into... the only doctor I know where the patients go, I think I need to go now. Yeah. You get sidetracked so often, they're like, Dr. Glenn, I've got an appointment somewhere else. So can't you just stay? I'm going to need to talk to somebody. This is from listening to my daughter when she was little, and then listening to lots of people, young people, fighting fear and sadness. I hate calling them depression, anxiety. They fight sadnesses and they fight fears. And it's part of the letter to a young nurse. It's another iteration of that. So it's Letter to a Young Nurse, Part 5. One day you will come to see that the mind too has anatomies of its own. Sorrow and fear are its stomach and spine. When my daughter was younger, she played with plastic ponies. I listened to her at times, hid myself around the corner. Hi, my name is Beautiful Darling Pony. Hello, my name is Yellow Amazing Pony. Are you my cousin? Yellow Amazing Pony. Yes, Beautiful Darling Pony, I'm your cousin. Shall we fly to the Magic Kingdom? Yes, I would love to fly to the Magic Kingdom. Oh no, Yellow Amazing Pony, it's Pony Killing Tiger. He's trying to kill us. Tiger Killing Pony will save us. Help us, Tiger Killing Pony. Bang, crash, pow, meow. Ha ha, it's your own fault, Pony Killing Tiger. You should have left us alone. Yeah, Pony Killing Tiger, Tiger Killing Pony is our cousin. You are a beautiful darling pony. You are an amazing yellow amazing pony. Nay, 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 nay. Years later, that conversation plays over in my mind. Sorrow and fear are our cousins, it seems. They roam the mind's high prairie. They ride our currents to their magic kingdoms. They are not gallbladders. They are not tonsils. They are not old hips, pockmarked and drab. They are dreams. They are stories. They are memories, a box full of books, a book full of boxes. What use are these? All the knives and the pills in the world will not help us against them. Some days they are chased by pony-killing tigers. For pony-killing tigers, you need to close your eyes. You need to imagine. You need dreams. You need stories. You need memories. More than anything else, you need tiger-killing ponies. So I think explaining to a young person that fear is a thing they can get their hand around, to anatomize it, because it's in an abstract place, it's in thinking, and when it's by their thinking, they think that is in their soul, and so they're bad. There's something bad because it's next to their soul. But by being able to take it out and make it concrete, give it a story, name it, place it on the table as an object, draw it on the board as a monster or a mosquito or a bumblebee or something. You're using storytelling. You're creating theatre on the table with all different plastic. I've got plastic toys on my table that become different things young people fear, or something that happened with this person or something. So I think that theatre, that telling stories, taking someone's story and showing it back to them, you're almost editing a story, eh? You're almost editing a story and saying, and that's where you look for the medicine in a person. You say, well, look, I've taken your story and I think it's got these main characters and they're amazing, yeah? And this person is oppressed and this person, and you're looking at it like this, but what if we put it all around like that? What would it look like then? And so you're showing the story back, and then the medicine that's in them, if they pick that story up and knit it together. And that is, you know, a doctor is a teacher, you know, so there's a huge teaching element in medicine, and being able to use words and see stories and relationships, I think, and make the abstract concrete, the imaginary world. You know, we think of people as having, doctors are good at thinking about physiology, about individual independent anatomical shape. That's a human being, but I don't reckon that's the case. Like, you are like a continental shelf. There's shape around you, there's shape spilling around you, and there's also shape in 3D in time. There's people that you carry, the dead, the hurt, the loving, all those that swoon around you, yeah? And that I bring the same ghosts. And sometimes in medicine, we just talk to each other while the ghosts connect. Yeah? And the ghosts go off and play pool or cards or bake cakes and go, when will they shut up? But so I think to be able to see that people are, that's, you know, we're taught to palpate the 4 quadrants of the abdomen, you know, and always do a rectal exam. You know, we're at pains to look at the physical body. So often pain in primary care is outside of the individual physiology. It's in the family, it's in the history, you know. I work my whole career in places where you know, I work for iwi providers or in iwi medicine, and I see thousands of times the history carried by people in their present situation. So people we're amazing creatures. We're our society, we're our community. That's all part of our physiology, and it's all part of story, and imagination gets us to that. You know what I mean? And it enables us to make the unseen seen. And so I think that's a really useful. These weren't not the reason I wrote poems. I just like pretty poems, you know. But these are the things I've found from working in poems. It's been a magnificent accidental. If I was an accountant, I would probably be in love with accounting by now.
Yeah. I mean, medicine is that amazing privileged intersection of all the arts that you were talking about, right? You know, story, history, narrative, spirit, emotion, psychology. You know, it's such a privilege.
It's old witch doctories. There's something that's really old in our profession, really deeply old as, you know, blowing onto the walls in France, you know, the caves in France, something as old as that. And there's something extraordinarily new, you know. Always, every 2 years, you're redundant. You've got to learn a whole lot of new science. And new therapies. So, but I think I might write a poem about how accounting is really about love.
Yeah, all right. That's a good place to wrap it up.
I think it could be.
I bet you didn't think you were going to go away from here knowing that you're a continental shelf.
Yeah.
Let's thank all our panellists for a wonderful presentation. Actually, I'd just like to really acknowledge you and the rest of your team here. I personally really appreciate the way you've integrated Te Ao Māori this year, and the Mihi Whakatau really, for our whānau, really represented the authenticity and the love behind that, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. You've been a wonderful chair today. Big round of applause for Emma as well during the session. I also wanted to say a really quick thank you to the publishers who've made the books possible. So Potton & Burton, BWB Text, Magpie Pulp, and of course Glenn himself, because he self-publishes a lot of his poetry. And if you want to see another one of his poems from his upcoming collection, it's just on the wall over there. It's the 2 panels in between the 2 windows. And I hope I can get a photo of you, Glenn, with your poem soon. And my deepest privilege to listen to these 4 storytellers. Let's join them. One more round of applause. Thank you very much. You're listening to the 2019 Nelson Arts Festival Page and Blackmore Pukapuka Talks.